When police walked into the house, something felt off right away. There were no broken windows, no signs of a break-in, just a quiet bedroom, and a man lying on the floor in his pajamas. His glasses were still sitting neatly on the nightstand. He hadn't even tried to fight back. Near him, a kitchen knife, a cricket bat, and the door, tied shut with a bathrobe belt. It looked like someone didn't want him to leave that room. But the strangest part? His girlfriend, Jane Andrews, was nowhere to be found. What really happened that night? And where did Jane go? If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Jane Andrews was born on April 1, 1967 in Cleethorpes, England, but financial hardship forced her family to relocate to nearby Grimsby. The move was not out of choice, it was out of necessity. Her father, a joiner, struggled to find steady employment. He drifted between casual jobs, never managing to support the family consistently. It was Jane's mother who held the household together. She worked first in social care, then as a teaching assistant. Her income, while reliable, wasn't enough. The family eventually downsized into a much smaller home. It had no bathroom, only an outdoor toilet. The situation was dire, so dire that they often scoured the house for spare coins, just enough to buy a loaf of bread. Yet pride kept them silent. Their relatives never knew how bad things really were. Jane was an intelligent child, bright, curious. Teachers saw her potential, but everything shifted during her teenage years. Mental health struggles crept in, depression, anxiety, panic attacks. Her grades began to slip. She started skipping school. Her mother found out. Jane was ashamed. She didn't want to rebel. She just couldn't be there. She began to feel like she had no future, that her life had no meaning. And then, one day, in a moment of deep despair, Jane attempted to end her life. She swallowed a large number of pills. She survived, but her mental health continued to decline. As she grew older, Jane sought comfort in short-lived relationships. At 17, she became pregnant. But she knew the father wasn't serious, and she wasn't ready to raise a child alone. She chose to terminate the pregnancy. At first, it felt like the right decision, but it haunted her. She tried to move forward, enrolled in a fashion design program in secondary school. When she graduated, she took a job designing children's clothes for a British retail chain. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. Still, she remained in Grimsby, living with her parents, and she hated it. Jane longed for more. She spent hours flipping through fashion magazines, imagining herself in those elegant outfits, dripping with designer jewelry. She wasn't just dreaming of success, she was desperate for it. She wanted out. Then came 1988. Jane was 21 when she spotted a job ad in one of those magazines. A busy mother was looking for a dresser, someone to help her with her wardrobe and daily styling. Jane assumed the woman must be wealthy. She applied, not knowing that her life was about to collide with royalty. 6 months later, Jane received an invitation to interview. She traveled to the address and found herself face to face with Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, the Duchess of York, wife to Prince Andrew. The two women clicked. Within a week, Jane received the letter that changed her life. She'd gotten the job. From Grimsby to Buckingham Palace, Jane was about to enter a new world. Her starting salary? £17,000 a year, modest by royal standards. But that wasn't what mattered to Jane. What mattered was access. She traveled the world at Sarah's side, brushed shoulders with aristocrats, and quickly began transforming herself. She took elocution lessons to lose her northern accent, trying to sound more like the royals. She changed her clothes, her mannerisms, her identity. And she had a plan. She wouldn't just work for the rich, she'd become one of them. She longed to marry into wealth, to finally escape the life she'd once known. Then, in April 1989, she met someone who seemed like the answer to it all. Christopher Dunn Butler. He was 21 years older than her, a senior director at IBM. Rich, refined, powerful, exactly the kind of man Jane had been waiting for. The only problem? He was already in a relationship. That didn't stop Jane. Their affair began in secret, but secrecy wasn't enough for Jane. She gave Christopher an ultimatum. Choose. Be with her, or lose her. He chose Jane. Soon after, their relationship was out in the open, and within the year they were engaged. In August, they were married. But what seemed like a fairy tale quickly soured. There was no passion, no chemistry. They were more like companions than lovers. Jane grew restless. Again, affairs followed, one after another. And in 1994, the marriage collapsed. Divorce. Jane didn't mourn. She had already found someone new. His name was Dimitri Horn, a Greek magnate, the son of a powerful shipping tycoon. She met him through the Duchess of York at yet another elegant gathering. Dimitri and Jane became inseparable. They dined in expensive restaurants, traveled in style, and lived the kind of romance Jane had always imagined. But then the cracks began to show. Jane's jealousy returned, consuming and relentless. If Dimitri looked at another woman, she noticed. If he spoke to one, she reacted, controlling, possessive, paranoid. Dimitri had had enough. When he ended the relationship, Jane exploded. She didn't just leave. She destroyed his apartment. She slashed his clothes, tore through his belongings in a blind fury. And when the dust settled, Jane swallowed pills again. But the dose wasn't fatal. She woke up, broken, alone. And the next blow came just a year later, in 1997. After 9 years of working alongside the Duchess of York, Jane was dismissed. The official explanation? Budget cuts. Sarah, now divorced from Prince Andrew, could no longer afford the staff she once had. But whispers told another story. Allegedly, Sarah had begun seeing an Italian businessman and noticed his eyes lingered too long on Jane. Rumors swirled. The Duchess feared Jane would seduce her partner next. There was no confirmation, but Jane was out. Jane felt betrayed. She had poured herself into that life, rebuilt her identity from scratch, and now she was left behind. Still, one thing was certain. She would not go back to Grimsby. She was staying in London. She tried a new job, managing the image of a London hotel, but 2 months in, she was fired. She lacked the experience, and everyone knew it. Then came another opportunity. A high-end jewelry store in the heart of the city. Jane took the job, not for the income, but for the clientele. Rich, connected, powerful. She was hunting again. In 1998, a friend invited her on a blind date. Jane accepted. The man's name? Thomas Ashley Cressman. Jane was 31. Thomas was 37. From the moment they met, Jane was captivated. Tall, handsome, successful, Thomas was everything Jane had ever dreamed of. His family was American by origin, but had settled in the UK. His father, a self-made multimillionaire, had built a European empire of car dealerships. Thomas had grown up in privilege, private schools, university in the States, a world away from Jane's childhood of outdoor toilets and coin hunts. Thomas had a passion for cars, especially sports cars. He loved getting his hands dirty, building and modifying engines for hours at a time. He was charming, enthusiastic, and attentive, and he fell for Jane. When Jane traveled to Greece with friends, Thomas called her every day, and when she returned, he greeted her with a massive bouquet of red roses. They were inseparable. Within just 3 months, Jane moved into Thomas's house. But the same demons followed. Jane couldn't handle seeing Thomas speak to other women. She hovered, interrupted, pulled him away, even during innocent conversations. She had to be the center of his attention. The possessiveness that had destroyed her past relationships had returned. From the beginning, Jane Andrews had one goal: to become Jane Cressman. She believed Thomas was the one. Wealthy, handsome, romantic, and above all, a future husband. But Thomas wasn't in any rush, and Jane was running out of patience. She began dropping hints, publicly, boldly, hoping pressure would push him toward a proposal. But Thomas stayed silent. Why? Was it cold feet? Or was there someone else? Jane had to know. So she checked his emails. There, she found what she feared most: messages exchanged with a woman he'd met on a flight to the United States. She didn't know how deep their connection was, but in Jane's mind, it could only mean one thing: he was cheating. That night, she confronted him. Thomas tried to explain. He had only met the woman once. The emails meant nothing. But Jane's rage was volcanic. Furious and humiliated, she demanded answers. To calm her, Thomas offered an escape, a trip to Italy. The timing wasn't random. A motorboat show was happening soon, an event he couldn't miss. After Italy, they would head to the French Riviera, to his family's vacation home. Jane agreed, secretly hoping this would be the trip. Their second anniversary was approaching. Perhaps, in the romance of the Riviera, he would finally propose. But when they arrived, it wasn't just the two of them. Friends joined them. Days were filled with shows, boating, laughter. Jane smiled, but inside she waited. And waited. No ring. No proposal. Finally, Jane couldn't take it anymore. She asked Thomas directly. His answer? There would be no engagement. Not now. Not ever. In fact, he was beginning to doubt their future altogether. Jane was stunned. The world she'd constructed in her mind shattered in seconds. They argued, loudly. Furious, she called a friend, venting in detail. She didn't whisper. She wanted people to hear. Even in the car ride to the airport with Thomas, his mother, and his nephew, she kept ranting over the phone. Everyone was uncomfortable. Jane didn't care. On Sunday, September 17th, 2000, 2 days after they returned to London, Thomas's mother, Barbara, tried calling her son. No answer. She called again. And again. Still nothing. She figured he and Jane might be out. Maybe lunch. Maybe they needed space. But when Thomas failed to call that day, or the next, Barbara's concern turned into fear. By Monday afternoon, she phoned his workplace. That's when alarm bells truly rang. Thomas hadn't shown up for work, not once, not even a message. This wasn't like him. Barbara asked one of his employees to check on him. The office was just across the street from Thomas's home, and they had a spare key. The employee knocked, rang the bell. No answer. He opened the door, called out. Silence. The downstairs was empty. Then he climbed the stairs. There, in one of the bedrooms, he saw him. Thomas Cressman was lying on the floor, motionless. He had been dead for hours. Blood surrounded him. The employee rushed outside and called emergency services, but it was too late. The police arrived, and what they found painted a picture no one was prepared for. A knife, missing from the kitchen, had been used to stab Thomas in the chest, and nearby, a cricket bat. Detectives believed he had been struck in the head before he was stabbed. There were no defensive wounds on his hands, no sign he fought back. He was in his pajamas. His glasses were on the nightstand. Thomas Cressman had been attacked in his sleep. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, no damaged locks. Whoever killed Thomas was already inside, and one question now burned through every investigator's mind. Where was Jane Andrews? Her car was missing. Her phone, silent. Was she another victim? Or the killer? Police issued a bulletin, asking the public for information on Jane's vehicle. Her friends, even Sarah Ferguson, tried to contact her. Still nothing. Then, movement. Her car had been spotted on a highway west of London. Surveillance at a gas station confirmed. Jane had been driving, alone. Inside Thomas's home, the evidence grew more damning. Handwritten notes. One read, "Thomas is horrible to me. He treats me badly." Another, "What have I done?" Even more chilling, Jane's blood-stained clothes were found in the hallway. A bathrobe. The belt from it had been tied from the bedroom doorknob to the stair railing. If Thomas had survived the initial attack, he would have been trapped, unable to escape. And someone had taken a shower. Traces of Thomas's blood were found in the drain. This wasn't a moment of passion. It was calculated. And now, Jane Andrews was missing. Investigators feared she was trying to flee the country. Her passport was gone. Her credit cards, too. Then, her phone lit up. She began texting friends, asking what had happened to Thomas, as if she had no idea. Her tone was casual, detached. But police weren't fooled. They were now tracking her location through her messages. She wasn't abroad. She was still in England, heading to Cornwall. Throughout the day, she messaged several people, but one friend, Lucinda, stayed in constant contact. That evening, Jane sent a chilling message. She had taken a large quantity of pills. A search began immediately. Helicopters scanned the highways and countryside. 4 days later, they found her car, parked, silent. Jane was inside, barely conscious, slumped in the back seat. She was rushed to the hospital. Her stomach was pumped, and once again, she survived. When she regained consciousness, Jane denied everything. She claimed to know nothing about Thomas's death. She hadn't killed him. Her story changed. At first, she said someone must have broken in, but detectives already knew there was no break-in. Eventually, she confessed, but not to murder, to self-defense. Jane told investigators the relationship had been violent, that Thomas had hit her, that she feared him so much she'd hidden a knife under their bed for protection. She said she never told anyone about the abuse because she was ashamed. She'd never been treated like that before. According to Jane, the night Thomas died, he had tried to initiate sex. When she refused, she claimed he slapped her, and then she blacked out. She insisted she had no memory of stabbing him. She was convinced, she said, that when she left the house, Thomas was still alive. But what really happened? After returning from the French Riviera, the tension between Jane and Thomas boiled over. On that first day back, and again the next morning, the house filled with shouting. Jane was relentless, screaming, smashing things inside Thomas's home. The man who once brought her roses now feared what she might do next. Shortly before noon on Saturday, Thomas picked up the phone and called the police. He told the operator there had been a violent argument, that things could end badly for either of them. But no officers were sent. There had been no physical crime, just a heated dispute. The operator told them to calm down, but by the time calm arrived, Thomas was dead. By the end of April 2001, Jane Andrews stood trial at the Old Bailey. She admitted to killing Thomas Cressman, but claimed it was self-defense. She painted him as abusive, controlling, physically violent. But those who knew Thomas didn't recognize the man she described. The jury deliberated for nearly 12 hours, and then the verdict: guilty. Jane Andrews was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of her partner. The court ordered she serve a minimum of 12 years before becoming eligible for parole. She filed an appeal. It was denied. 9 years passed. In 2010, Jane was moved to an open prison, a facility where inmates can leave during the day and return at night. But one day, she didn't return. She disappeared. For 2 days, no one knew where she was. Then, she was found in a hotel, just 6 miles away, meeting her parents. There were no consequences for the escape, but it cast a long shadow over her parole hearing in 2012. Her release was denied. Then came 2015. 4 years later, authorities ruled that Jane was no longer a threat to society. She was granted parole and walked free after 14 years behind bars. But freedom didn't last long. In 2018, she was arrested again, this time for harassment. She remained in prison for another year. Upon her release in 2019, she moved to Lincolnshire, her new life, working in a supermarket, stocking shelves, from royal palaces to prison blocks, and finally, quiet anonymity. While in custody, Jane was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, a condition marked by intense emotional swings, impulsivity, deep fear of abandonment, and unstable relationships. Some experts believe this diagnosis explains her violent outburst, that her inability to handle rejection played a central role in Thomas's murder. But her mental health struggles didn't change the facts, and they didn't alter the sentence. Thomas Cressman was only 37 years old. He had a future, a family, a life full of plans. His death was sudden, brutal, senseless. May his memory never fade, and may his story remind us all of the fragility of love and the importance of seeking help before it's too late. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.